My name is Nora Bennett. I built a healthcare platform that now serves over 45,000 users across 11 states. It started in the back corner of a public library, with $2 in my account, one cracked laptop, and no one in my family speaking my name out loud. Not because I failed, but because I walked away. Because I chose a path they didn't write for me. And when I saved lives, they still called it a phase. Funny how strangers saw my value long before my parents ever did. Today I'm sitting on the balcony of my Boston office, coffee in hand, watching the city light up beneath me. And for the first time in years, the silence feels like mine. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever been the name they tried to forget, stick around. This story is for you. The rain outside pressed against the window pane like a memory that wouldn't leave. It wasn't loud, just persistent, like the static hum of disappointment that had shadowed Nora Bennett since the spring of 2019. She leaned forward, elbow propped on her desk, watching the way the gray light bent through droplets and settled across the room. Her third-floor apartment in Dorchester was modest, but it was hers. 2 rooms, one fading orchid on the windowsill, a tea mug half full, the liquid now cold and bitter from hours of neglect. The call came just as she reached to reheat the cup for the 3rd time. The name on the screen blinked, Ms. Bernice Harper. Nora clicked to accept. Ms. Harper? Oh, sweetheart, you're there. I got lost in the portal again. Keeps asking me for something called 2-factor, but it only lets me type one thing. Nora smiled gently. It's okay. You're not lost. We're just going to find a shortcut. She guided the woman step by step, her tone low, warm, precise. It wasn't flashy what she did. No applause followed a successful login. No medals for helping seniors navigate online Medicaid. But as Ms. Harper's relieved laughter filled the speaker, Nora felt something shift. A quiet flicker of impact, invisible but real. When the call ended, she marked the interaction complete and stretched her fingers. A new Slack ping popped up. Caleb Monroe. 39,000 users this quarter. 3 states circling formal adoption. Gotta say it. You built something brilliant. She let the message sit. Caleb always knew when to drop praise like a stone into still water. No ripples, just weight. Nora stared at the screen for a moment longer, then minimized the chat and turned to the small stack of mail she'd been avoiding. There it was. Ivory envelope. Thick. Embossed. Stephen and Diane Bennett request the pleasure of your company at the preview wedding dinner honoring Allison Shaw and Stephen Bennett. The handwriting was familiar. Her mother's. Elegant and impersonal, like it had been inked through gritted teeth. There was no Dear Nora, no We miss you. Just details. Dress code, valet instructions, RSVP deadline. Nora's eyes scanned the bottom. We hope you can make it. She let out a dry breath that wasn't quite a laugh. The kind of laugh you give a door that locks behind you. For 5 years, there had been silence. Now this? She placed the invitation on her desk like a foreign object. For a moment, she imagined not going, shredding it, tossing it, letting them live in the certainty that she wouldn't dare show her face. Then she opened her laptop. The blank screen of her digital journal flickered. Without hesitation, she typed, I don't owe them anything, but I'll go. Just to see how small they still think I am. The cursor blinked at her like a challenge. Across the desk, her cup of tea had gone cold again. The orchid on the windowsill tilted slightly toward the glass, as if reaching for a break in the sky. Just as she was about to shut the computer, a new email notification appeared. She clicked it without thinking. Subject: Partnership interest. Main community health body. We'd like to schedule a call about statewide integration. Your platform's reach is exactly what we need. She read the line again, then again. A small tremor rose at the edge of her chest. Part disbelief, part defiance, all energy. The rain was still falling, but something inside her had started to rise. You can RSVP to a dinner without agreeing to be invisible. The line echoed in Nora's head as she leaned over her desk, her fingers resting lightly on the mouse. The RSVP page was open, glowing softly on the screen. One click. That was all it would take. One click to announce her presence. Without apology, without permission. But not yet. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Caleb Monroe. Maine's trial contract is in. 3-month pilot. If they like it, we're in 27 counties. Nora's mouth twitched into something close to a smile. She typed back quickly. Nora, don't say anything yet. Let's finish the update first. She didn't need her family knowing. Not now. Not like this. Let them believe what they wanted a little longer. The longer they stayed blind, the better the reveal would feel. Outside, the March air had softened. Still cold, but not sharp. She pulled on her coat and headed into the city. The boutique was tucked between a coffee shop and a florist, smelling faintly of cedar and warm fabric softener. Nora ran her fingers along a rack of deep navy dresses. Nothing sparkly, nothing loud. Just clean lines, soft silhouettes. She wasn't here to impress anyone, but she wouldn't show up looking like an apology either. In the next fitting room, a girl's voice rang out. I don't want the mermaid cut, Mom. I want to breathe. The mother's reply was dry. Then maybe don't get married. A beat. Then laughter. Real. Unguarded. Nora looked up as the curtain shifted, revealing a young woman, maybe mid-20s, hair tucked under a velvet beret. Her eyes were sharp, her posture loose, like someone who'd seen enough of life to stop fearing it. The girl spotted her. You waiting on a fitting too? No, Nora replied. Just browsing. For a family thing. The girl nodded. Stressful? Nora gave a half smile. You could say that. The woman stepped aside to let her mother pass. Anyway, you know that app that finds rehab centers? It saved my sister's life. Like we wouldn't have known where to start without it. Something flickered between them. A glance. A silence. Then the girl walked past, the moment gone. Nora's fingers tightened slightly around the fabric she'd been holding. She didn't ask for more. Didn't say who she was. There was something sacred in not claiming credit, in letting the impact breathe on its own. She left the boutique empty-handed but lighter. Back home, the apartment greeted her with its usual hush. She poured herself a fresh cup of tea and opened her laptop. A new message had come in. Subject? From Rural Nurse. Hi, Nora. We've used your tool to manage 82 senior cases this month alone. It saved hours of paperwork, made everything smoother. Just thank you. Nora stared at the screen, chest tight. Not because it was unexpected, but because it never stopped mattering. She took a screenshot, labeled the file carefully. Proof_038 2.png. Then she returned to the RSVP page. Her finger hovered for only a moment before she clicked yes. The confirmation screen loaded with a soft chime, casting a faint yellow light on the wall beside her. She looked at the glow and muttered under her breath, Let them underestimate me one last time. A Slack notification broke the silence. Caleb Monroe. One more feature test before the wedding, yeah? Let's make it bulletproof. Nora's fingers hovered over the keyboard. One more test. One more layer. Let them think it's just a dinner. At family dinners, there's always a script. Mine never had lines. Just silent stage directions. The Alara garden shimmered like a stage set dipped in honey. Light pooled in golden halos from chandeliers overhead, catching the silverware just so, reflecting in the walls of polished glass. The room was a quiet performance of wealth and curated celebration. No laughter too loud, no gesture too large. Just elegance, rehearsed to perfection. Nora stood for a beat at the entrance, her coat folded over one arm, her dress simple and black. Not flashy, not forgettable. A waiter motioned discreetly toward the back. Round tables, 7 courses, floral menus printed on pearl cardstock. She spotted them instantly. Stephen, back straight, jaw clenched like he was managing a boardroom. Diane, lips painted too red, eyes sharp behind flawless mascara. And Eric, the reason for the event. The golden boy with his arm draped lazily around Chloe's chair. No one stood up when Nora approached. Stephen glanced up briefly. His nod was the kind you give to a colleague who arrived late to a quarterly review. Diane didn't look up at all, just adjusted her napkin and leaned slightly away. Nora pulled out her chair, careful not to scrape the floor, and sat down. "Wine?" the waiter asked. "Yes," she said, and watched the glass fill. For the first course, conversation sparkled with Eric's accomplishments. Series B funding nearly closed, a penthouse view of the Charles River, a feature spread in Boston visionaries. Stephen puffed with approval. Diane cooed. A few cousins murmured admiration like stagehands feeding cues. Nora swirled her wine, watching the room through the glass. The second course came with subtle ridicule. "So," Diane asked as she picked at a citrus salad, "you're still working with the elderly or something?" Nora paused, fork midair. Stephen chuckled. "It's noble, really. Not profitable, but noble. The kind of work that wins you a ribbon, not revenue." There were smirks, sips, an odd kind of clinking, one that masked the discomfort of cruelty passed off as banter. She said nothing. The third course arrived. Seared scallops in saffron sauce. The room buzzed on. Chloe leaned toward Eric, whispering something, then suddenly looked across the table, right at Nora. "Wait," she said, her brow knitting. "Are you Nora Bennett?" The table stilled a fraction. Nora met her gaze. She started. Chloe blinked, then leaned forward, louder now. "GuideLink? The app that maps behavioral recovery and senior care? No, I know you helped my family. You changed our lives." Silence sliced the table. The sound of chewing stopped mid-bite. A spoon landed too hard against a bowl. One of the uncles looked confused. Stephen slowly put his knife and fork down. Diane's eyes flicked left, then right. She whispered, "What is this?" No one looked at Eric anymore. No one looked away from Nora, and she didn't flinch. For once, the room wasn't quiet because of me. It was quiet because they didn't know what to say. The silence didn't break. It cracked. A tremor passed through the table, rippling across plates and glasses, but no one moved. The chandelier light felt harsher now, colder. The Alara Garden's elegance curdled into something theatrical and cruel, like a courtroom disguised in roses. Nora's breath was steady. Her spine didn't shift. She felt the weight of her name hanging in the space. Finally spoken. Finally seen. But not by the people who were supposed to know it best. Chloe's hands trembled slightly as she set down her fork. "After the crash," she said softly, "we couldn't get my sister into therapy. There were waitlists everywhere. She was spiraling. We thought we were going to lose her." No one at the table reached for their wine. "A nurse gave us a link," Chloe went on. "Said it was something new. GuideLink." Her eyes shone, not from tears, but the sheer memory of fear. "It showed every open resource. My sister was in a clinic 2 days later. That platform saved us. It saved her." Across the table, Eric stiffened. "You're sure it's the same app?" he asked, voice tight. Chloe blinked, puzzled. "Of course I'm sure. I use it in my internship now." "Why?" Eric's mouth opened, but he had no words. His eyes flicked to Stephen, to Diane, then down to his lap. Chloe stared. "You sent me an article once, about a woman founder in health tech. You said, 'This one's interesting.'" Her eyes darted to Nora, back to Eric. "You didn't say it was your sister." Eric didn't reply. Stephen shifted in his chair, jaw twitching. "Why didn't you tell us?" he snapped, low but sharp. "You've had this the whole time?" Nora tilted her head. Her voice was clear, like cold air. "You never asked, only talked." A beat. Then Chloe stood, her napkin falling to the floor unnoticed. She turned to the full table, voice calm but loud enough to reach the surrounding guests. Just so everyone knows, GuideLink is the real thing. Thousands of people use it. Hospitals, clinics, families like mine. And Nora, she looked back at her, is not a failure. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't shouted, but it echoed. Aunts went still. Cousins froze mid-sip. Across the hall, someone from another table paused their fork halfway to their mouth. Stephen looked away. Diane's hands trembled as she folded her napkin with surgical precision. Then she stood. But this time, no one turned to watch her. All eyes stayed on Nora. The phone buzzed all night. Funny how silence collapses when they realize they don't control the story anymore. By the time Nora landed in Philadelphia, she had already muted 6 text threads and declined 2 surprise calls from relatives she hadn't heard from in half a decade. It wasn't fury that simmered in her chest. It was clarity. Solid. Settled. The Harper and Main Cafe was quiet in the morning, half the tables still empty. Soft jazz curled through the air. Nora sat with her coat draped behind her on the chair, sipping black coffee that had cooled just enough to taste bitter, truthfully. Eric arrived late, as expected. Still polished, still careful. But his collar sat wrong, and his eyes didn't hold their usual easy charm. He didn't offer a hug. He just sat, folding his hands. I read the article, he said after a long pause. Tech Point. About you. GuideLink. Nora met his gaze without flinching. I didn't know what to say, he continued, eyes falling to the table. If you became more than what they expected, I didn't know what that made me. She exhaled slowly, voice even. Love shouldn't be a one-seat competition. Eric didn't respond at first. Then a nod, faint, like a page being turned. The library smelled the same as it did when she was 10, like glue and quiet intentions. Nora sat in a sun-drenched corner, facing 2 people who had once choreographed her entire life like a parade of checklists and shame. Stephen looked older in daylight. Diane held a battered cookie box in her lap, as if she'd brought memories to soften what they'd come to do. We didn't know you'd go this far, Diane said, voice almost fragile. Nora didn't blink. You didn't think I could. That's different. Stephen rubbed his temples. We were trying to guide you. We thought, if we pushed a little harder, you erased me, she said flatly. Every time I made something that didn't look like your version of success, you deleted it. I stopped handing you drafts because I stopped needing your edits. Diane's voice cracked. We should have... I don't need that to move forward. Nora cut in gently. I'm not here to be healed by your regret. She stood, smoothing her jacket. I'm not asking for acceptance. I'm giving you rules. From now on, no more praise for someone at the expense of me. No more polite erasure. I'm not returning to that table as the reasonable child. Stephen looked stunned. Diane clutched the cookie box tighter. I'm already whole, Nora said softly. And I don't need to prove that by letting you break me again. The GuideLink headquarters in Boston was humming with soft noise. Developers at standing desks, UI sketches projected on glass walls, Caleb pacing near the coffee machine with a phone tucked between shoulder and cheek. He glanced up when Nora walked in, lifted his phone, then mouthed, Check your messages. Nora pulled hers out. Caleb Monroe, keynote confirmed. East Coast Health Tech. You ready? She stared at the screen for a moment. Her reflection caught faintly in the glass. Then she smiled. Small, earned. Ready didn't mean unafraid, but it meant unshakable. They used to say I was wasting time. Now strangers were standing just to hear what I'd built. The lights above the stage were bright, but not the kind that made you sweat. They warmed like early sun on concrete steps, the way Boston felt in late spring. Nora adjusted the mic slightly. Steady hands, steady breath. A soft murmur traveled through the Philadelphia Convention Center, then fell silent. She looked out at a sea of people. Doctors, nurses, reporters, tech founders with lanyards and laptops half-zipped. The banner behind her read, "Tech for Equity," Access Reimagined, but Nora didn't need to glance back. She'd carried the words in her bones for years. She didn't smile to open. She didn't need to. "I started building GuideLink in the basement of the Boston Public Library," she said, her voice even. "I didn't have an LLC. I had $2 left in my account and a part-time shift at the rehab desk upstairs." A pause. No dramatic pause. Just space. Earned. "I wasn't the loudest or the most funded, but I had names in a notebook. People who had called helplines that never rang back. Grandmothers, veterans, teenagers who never got a second appointment." A nurse near the fourth row pressed a tissue to her mouth. "Left-handed coding. One loop at a time. I built something to keep showing up when everything else broke." The screen behind her changed. User map, system traffic, the dot matrix climb of real-time data. 45,216 current users, 11 states, dozens of hospitals. Nora didn't blink. "You don't need a title to lead," she said, gaze locked forward. "You just need to care enough to keep showing up." Applause came like a tidal pull, not instant, not programmed. First from the back rows, chairs scraping as people stood, then the center, then all at once. Nora didn't bow. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes. 2 seconds, no more, and let the moment sit. Not a reward, not a correction. A knowing. Later, in the quiet after noise, she stood backstage beside Caleb. He said nothing, just handed her a bottle of water and gave her a look. One part pride, one part told you so. Her phone buzzed. Subject: "Thank you." From S. Miller, RN, Glenwood, MEMS. "Bennett, I'm a nurse from rural Maine. Your talk today gave us something we didn't know we needed. Hope. We used to spend hours calling dead numbers. Last week, we placed 4 patients in the right hands in under 20 minutes. You reminded us why we signed up for this work. Thank you." S. Nora stared at the screen. She didn't reply. Not yet. She just held it there, thumb against glass, as if her whole journey had led to that line. She stepped outside. The sidewalk gleamed faintly from rain hours earlier, catching the late light. There was no one waiting by the curb. No driver. No family. No good job meant to buy forgiveness. Just air. Her breath. Her own pace. She didn't look back. She had arrived. On her terms. She was once the name no one said aloud. Spoken of in the third person, if at all. Like a failed experiment the family preferred to forget. The kind of silence they wrapped around her wasn't peaceful. It was surgical. Sharp. Calculated. For years, her absence was more convenient than her presence. It allowed others to shine without interference, to claim the spotlight without question. They never asked what happened after she walked away, because the story was easier if she simply didn't exist in it anymore. But silence isn't the same as surrender. What they dismissed as a detour, her work with forgotten patients, out-of-date libraries, late-night code, became a lifeline for strangers across the country. Nora never built GuideLink to win approval. She built it because someone had to, because she knew what it felt like to be overlooked when help was needed most. For her, it wasn't about headlines or applause. It was about impact that didn't need permission. Still, when the night came, the preview wedding dinner, and someone finally said her name aloud with respect, not judgment, it wasn't vengeance she felt. It was recognition. Not just from Chloe or the guests who suddenly paused their praise for Eric, but from the room itself. From the years. From the version of her who once whispered lines of code into an empty apartment, not knowing if anyone would ever care. What followed wasn't a dramatic takedown. There were no raised voices, no flipping of tables, just stillness. A shift. The kind of silence that no longer belonged to shame, but to realization. Her parents couldn't interrupt it. Her brother couldn't deflect it. Because this time, it didn't come from her. It came from someone whose life she had changed, And that was a truth no one at that table could argue with. In the days after, the old dynamics tried to return. Apologies were shaped, but not always spoken. Excuses were offered, thin as tissue. But Nora had already moved beyond seeking validation. She didn't need redemption from people who had never granted her belonging in the first place. What she needed, what she claimed, was authority over her own narrative. And that, finally, was something no one could deny her. She met each of them, Eric, Stephen, Diane, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Not to plead, not to punish, but to define the boundary. She was no longer willing to shrink so others could appear larger. Her work spoke. Her decisions stood. Her life, once cast aside as a cautionary tale, had become a model of resilience, innovation, and quiet power. By the time she took the stage in Philadelphia, the applause felt like an echo, not of the crowd, but of every small, deliberate act of defiance that brought her here. Of every line of code typed in darkness. Of every rejection that rerouted her path. Of every moment she chose to continue even when no one believed she should. That final email, from the rural nurse in Maine, wasn't just appreciation. It was validation from the only source that ever mattered. The people she built it for. In the end, Nora didn't win because she proved her family wrong. She won because she proved herself right. And refused to be erased. She didn't reclaim her place at the table. She built a better one and invited the world to sit down. Justice in her story didn't come with a gavel. It came with a link. With access. With the truth delivered one patient, one family, one platform at a time. And the ones who once silenced her? They were left to watch. Not because she made them suffer, but because she no longer needed their permission to shine. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late. But it resonates powerfully once it's heard. No wall of dismissal can stand forever when someone refuses to stay small. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. If you've ever been silenced at your own table, if you've ever had to earn respect outside the walls that raised you, then you already know. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't need revenge to reclaim your story. You just have to keep building, even when they stop looking. Hit subscribe if you're done shrinking. Leave a comment if you've ever been erased. And kept going anyway. Because sometimes the most powerful voice in the room is the one they tried hardest to ignore. Double asterisk. You can wear your little tailored blazer and call yourself a strategic partner all you want, Natalie. But let's not pretend. You were always the spare, the extra child. We gave you piano lessons while Vanessa saved lives. We paid your rent while Connor built a firm. You weren't raised for legacy. You were raised not to embarrass us. That's what my mother said, at my grandmother's will reading, right in front of everyone, like I was never part of this family to begin with. Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Green and I'm 28 years old. Have you ever been treated like the extra? The invisible one in your own family? Like someone they only kept around out of pity? If so, stay with me. Because this isn't just a story about being humiliated. This is how I turned their contempt into power. And silence into a quiet revolution. The mahogany dining table gleamed under the chandelier's light, every glass and silver utensil meticulously arranged like an over-rehearsed play. The chair at the head, Grandma Ellie's, stood out with its black satin cover, untouched and untouched. Still, they all acted like her absence meant nothing. As if the matriarch of the Green dynasty hadn't died 3 weeks ago. I sat quietly, third seat from the left. Not close enough to the center to matter, but just within reach of a cutting remark. Vanessa, in her snow-white blazer dress, beamed like a politician on the campaign trail. The medical board just extended my credentials for another 5 years. Honestly, it's exhausting being this needed. Connor laughed, his Rolex catching the light. Vanessa, you say that every year. Some of us are trying to build things from scratch. Ever heard of venture capital, or do they not teach that in med school? Dad, stiff in his double-breasted navy suit, chuckled approvingly. Now that's my son. Ambitious, just like Ellie was at that age. Mother raised her glass, crimson nails curled like claws. To success. I didn't raise mine. Vanessa turned to me like she'd just noticed I'd crashed the party. Still freelancing, dear? Or are you finally considering something stable? I met her eyes and smiled. Soft. Unbothered. Still freelancing. What I didn't say, the LLC they thought was just freelance consulting was Phoenix Strategic.